Some content or topics discussed could trigger a past anxiety or be sensitive or disturbing to listen to or view. Please view and listen with caution. Hi, my name is Todd Blyleven. I'm one of the hosts of the Walking Tall podcast, and it's our mission to help all people that are down and depressed or dealing with some sort of trauma or mental health issue to learn how to stand back up and walk tall again in their lives. Please follow us on all of our social platforms, our YouTube channel, and check out our Walking Tall movement at www.walkingtallmovement.com. Now, here's our show.
Welcome back to Walking Tall. Last week we met and were inspired by the amazing story of Chris Brown and his amazing tale of serving our country, turning into his passions and walking tall for mental health. Todd, what was most memorable last week about meeting Chris? I feel like I saw your jaw drop a few times. Gotta believe there were some similarities to his story and yours and mine, frankly. But what was your takeaways from last week?
Well, number one, just a true patriot, right? Anybody in our military, family of military, I mean, hats off, to everybody there. But Chris's story, absolutely gripping in terms of how he, walked us through that battle where he was injured and all his fellow, Marines and the firefight that they got into. And because I know, just speaking me personally, I know, Chris, this was also affected you as well, but me personally, because of what I saw, the running, I think the adrenaline that we both shared in that moment, I was there. Unfortunately, I had some nightmares that night that came back just in listening to his experience, but it was educational because it really tells the story of how an 18 to 22-year-old kid in our country is over fighting for others to survive and fighting for their not only their comrades, but they're on this mission to help and to battle that that fatigue. Was amazing to hear his story of adversity and nonstop fighting for his friends, his soldiers, his comrades, and then the aftermath of what he was talking about with once all the dust settled and he's in the hospital and he's alone and he's feeling that sense of just being solo. That's how I felt. That's how Woody felt. That's how you felt. And that once everything kind of calms down from that crazy adversity, that was really educational for me to hear that again. And I've mentioned it too. A former military friend of mine that is one of my rocks had mentioned that to me as well. The silence, what you do in that moment, and knowing that there's support there. And now the inspiration of what he's doing to help others, not only on the VA side, but learning new skill sets on the EMDR and other therapeutic. It's just a true awesome guy. And I was so privileged to have met him, and I'm excited we're going to be doing more with him. So yeah. I thought last week's episode was amazing.
Yeah, I did too. And you said something, there, Todd, we're going to be doing more with him. And that's the intent of this movement, frankly, in Walking Tall, is as we start to learn other professionals' missions and visions and values, and we start to instill ours upon others, that's really how we're going to grow Walking Tall and normalize the mental health conversation we have on a weekly basis. So Vanetta, Dr. LaRosa, if you will, sorry about that. Hearing Chris's story had to feel similar to hearing Todd's and mine earlier in this journey of ours. But what stood out and what resonated most with you?
Well, to second everything that Todd just said, because that's everything I was going to say. So you saved us a couple of minutes there on on your beautiful recount of our time together with Chris. I just feel so blessed to meet the types of people that we have been meeting, and just to know them is to love them. To thank him and Woody and all the others for their service, again, is such an understatement. It really brought to light for me what our soldiers are doing for us in a more commonplace, day-to-day part of their job that we are just completely not realizing. It really brought it to light for me what our servicemen and women are going through. And we don't think of it like that. I would never have known if I saw him on the street what he had been through, just that battle that he described, waking up, not having shoes on, having to go through that entire battle, pretty much unclothed, no shoes. I mean, it's miraculous to me. And when we talked about his age, I mean, he enlisted at 17. Again, that was what really, struck me when you think about it, because obviously I have a son that's 16, and I know that Todd, you have teenage children as well, and you know how underdeveloped they are mentally, to deal with stuff like that. And hearing his whole story, I already had a tremendous amount of respect for those that serve our country. My father was in the Air Force. My husband's dad is a former intrepid crew member. My uncle was, in the Army. I mean, so I have a tremendous amount of respect as it is, but just hearing firsthand what he went through in the time that he served just made me think about all the others out there that have stories to share that we don't know about as well. So I thank him for bringing light to that and for spending the time with us.
Yeah, absolutely. It's we've made a new friend here in Walking Tall, and Chris Brown, and it's just been an honor of mine, frankly, to get to know him on a more personal level, as well as we've interacted via text and phone calls and emails and things of that sort. But the thing that stood out to me, aside from what Todd you described and Dr. LaRosa what you just mentioned, was his ability to think outside the box and solve problems that he was experiencing himself, right? Whether it was growing veterans and his understanding of how agriculture and how therapeutic growing plants and sustainable food was for veterans, and then how quick he was to jump into action and is now serving as a therapist in the VA, and then his work with peak psychotherapy out of Seattle and his interest in psychedelic practices and things of that sort. So, he's just so well-rounded and such a perfect living example of what Walking Tall looks like, from his experiences and his trauma and the PTSD he suffers, the stories he's shared on our show and he's sharing on social media and his own daily walk, if you will. But using those experiences for good is something, the world needs more of, frankly, and exactly what we're trying to do together on Walking Tall. And it really stood out, that there is a lot of people in this world suffering, but a lot of people doing a lot of good because of it. And as far as I'm concerned, he's at the top of the totem pole, right? But there was one thing he said as he was telling his story that, resonated a little bit with me, but resonated in a different fashion, right? He mentioned, as he was telling his story, how he carried to a degree some survivor's guilt, right? And that stood out to me because as far as my experience goes, and I won't speak for you, Todd, I'll let you speak for yourself here shortly, but, I don't carry that type of guilt from my experience. Right. So I think, there's a lot of varying differences in our experiences and how we've come out of it, but I understand why he would feel that way. Right. You think about our law enforcement, our military professionals protecting our country. They train, right? Both Woody and Chris talked about their training, and they talked about their boot camp, if you will, and things of that sort. So they become brothers and sisters in arms with their, brothers and sisters, if you will, again. And they develop different types of relationships and bonds. So I could completely understand why someone like Chris or Woody, for that matter, if they have a fallen comrade, would suffer that survivor's guilt. But like in my experience of the 4th of July parade, while I'm certainly saddened and have such great sorrow for what others are experiencing, the 7 that didn't make it, the others that got shot, but I got to tell you guys, like, I'm happy to be alive, right? And I don't feel this guilt from my experience, but I understand it, right? Like I feel pride in what I was able to do that day. I feel sorrow for the outcomes and the experiences I had and others had as well. But guilt is just not something at this point in my experience I'm encountering. And Todd, I'd love to hear, your perspective on that survivor's guilt. We heard your story, and as far as I'm concerned, man, like it was just as gripping, right? Like what you did is no different, just in a different environment than what Chris did. But how do you feel about that survivor's guilt? Do you carry some of it? Do you understand it? Like, where are you at when it comes to that?
Yeah, really well said, Chris. Number one, I don't. I'm very happy, that obviously I'm alive. I'm very saddened with what I saw, that night in Las Vegas. 58 people passed away, and obviously some passed away, in a hospital setting, and there's this hope that you're going to make it, and then the downside of that they didn't is unbelievably hard to deal with. I know, in my personal experience, we have a lot of friends that were there that are suffering and have suffered with survivor's guilt, or just the fact that maybe they didn't do more. They didn't come out of their hiding place, wherever that it was. And first, like I mentioned in the beginning, fight, run, hide, protect yourself first, put yourself in a safe environment, regardless of everything, before you act to step out of that safe environment. Make sure that you're safe. And there were a lot of people that felt, I think they heard stories like mine or others that went back in with a almost kind of a disregard of my own safety to help others. They felt they should have done more. And I've always said to those people, God put you in that place to protect yourself, right? That impulse, that self-protective component of being safe is what you need to lean on. And there's a purpose why you're still here. And be proud that you had the courage enough to protect yourself and those around you, to get yourself and those others out into a safe environment. Whether it was hide 8 stories up in a casino hotel on someone else's room, which people scattered everywhere, hiding behind a bed. Stories of even current or off-duty law enforcement officers hiding behind beds, barricading doors, 9-10 stories up in different hotels across, because it was so chaotic. But the guilt part, I've walked away from that moment knowing that God was with me. And here's this testament of my faith, right? This is what I lean on. And I'm a strong believer that I have a purpose. Whatever that, it's not for me to dictate what that purpose is. I can only try to be proud of what I've done in my past. And I can only try to be as positive as I can with others that I'm around and try to help those in need. And my faith probably has a lot to do with me not having survivor's guilt. But I think too, I'm going to shift a little bit before we get to Vanetta, because I at least want to plant this seed as you're starting to kind of narrate us through guilt, because I'm a little confused on it as well, on my feelings. But I turn this to kind of athletics too. Like, what type of guilt might I have when I was playing? Did I have guilt when I played? Did I do enough? Did I leave the game at the right time? Did I make the right decisions that maybe could have altered my playing career a little bit longer? Things like that. So I think it's just guilt, I think, is around us in a lot of different areas, right? And I'd love to hear Vanetta's viewpoint on that more. But yeah, my circumstance, I was a little unlike Chris. And not saying that there's anything wrong by any means of having that. It just didn't happen.
No, I think, like I said earlier, I understand the differences, right? Like, less your family, Todd, and less my coworkers to a degree. I didn't know anybody, right? Like, I was just helping strangers. I was more concerned about the well-being of people in general. Whereas Chris or Woody or that matter, they know these people inside and out, right? So I could understand that guilt to a great magnitude. And what I also wanted to say, for those that do suffer survivor's guilt from experiences like ours, the goal is to make it out alive, right? And I think in any instance, you should celebrate that. And what resonated with me is, after my experience, on July 5th and 6th, like, I heard so much from people, and like, without a doubt, most everybody just said, "I'm glad you're still alive." Like, that was so like impactful and really at the greater level, right? Like the goal. And it's unfortunate that in your experience, Todd, and so in mine and in Chris's, and I'm sure some of Woody's law enforcement brothers and sisters also haven't made it. And that's certainly a saddening situation. But the goal is to be on this earth as long as you possibly can, right? And to do with your experiences and to make good from them, like we're doing here on Walking Tall, like Woody's done, like Chris Brown is doing, and like many of our other guests will do. So yeah, Dr. LaRosa, if you don't mind, talk to us a little bit about how some folks can start to wallow in their guilt and how this kind of resonates with people, where it comes from. How do we subside it if we have it? Yeah, give us a little bit of throwdown, like Todd's called it, with guilt.
Sure. Well, it's
You're muted.
important to it's important to know that, guilt is a common symptom of depression, right? So once it gets into that recycling of guilty feelings and feelings of worthlessness, when guilt becomes excessive and irrational, we have to know that it's linked to anxiety and depression. So sometimes this can be a cue for us to know our own red flags and prompt us to go and get a level of help that we might not have otherwise gotten if we would have thought that these feelings of guilt are natural and normal. Of course, some feelings after a traumatic experience of guilt and regret are natural and normal. But when those feelings of guilt, which is really a very subjective term, right?
Mm-hmm.
But when those feelings of guilt become excessive and irrational, we have to know that that they are linked to greater mental health issues, deeper levels of anxiety and depression and OCD. And that's the time to go and get further evaluation and assistance for what people are going through. So that's really important. I just really want to point that out. Guilt, in its subjective terminology, can trigger activity in our limbic system. Our limbic system exists on both sides of our thalamus, and it really is like a supportive set of structures that support our emotional processing, if you will.
Mhm.
So it's like an underlying support system for how we process various emotions. So when these feelings of guilt come on, the limbic system is activated, the foundation of emotional processing is affected, and oftentimes this leads to feelings of anxiety. So feeling guilty then makes us feel anxious, which could then make people feel even more guilty, thereby increasing the anxiety and so on and so forth. So this is what I'm talking about this cognitive behavioral loop when things become excessive, when they become irrational, when we're just playing over and over and over again in our heads the things that we feel that we did wrong or could have done better, and we allow that to kind of paralyze us with this thought process of beating ourselves down. That's when people should really have a clue that maybe this is linked to depression.
Sure.
So that's how people feel. When you're depressed, that's sort of how you feel. You think about the mistakes that you've made or the perceived mistakes that you've made, or you create situations where you're very, very hard on yourself and you judge yourself to be somehow wrong, less than, a failure, could have done something better, affected someone in a negative way that you just can't seem to forgive yourself for. And these are the thoughts that will hammer down a person who is experiencing this type of situation, this depression. And then it becomes worse and it becomes worse. And it just, the time that they're spending on thinking about these negative things just continues to grow and grow.
Mhm.
And then the feelings of worthlessness develop. And now we know we're entered into a territory of depression where we really need to get some help. So it's just important to know everything in our society. There's a cultural basis for all this. What's normal? What's abnormal?
Yeah.
It's a good question to keep asking ourselves when we're experiencing things like this. And it's good to always keep an eye on our symptoms, because when they start to cross the line, it's very easy to miss. And then sometimes people can, just go in that downward trend, for a period of time. And then it's much more difficult to sometimes jump into the help that people need to work their way out of it. So, I
Yeah.
just want to caution that, make sure people are aware of that.
Sure. And you said something too, just now that really kind of had a light bulb go off in my head, the rational versus irrational, right? I will tell you both, after my experience on the 4th, I really intended to be as rational as possible, knowing that in many instances I was being irrational, whether I was going into the grocery store or the movie theater or, the farmer's market the week of. Like, I've been in those environments hundreds, if not thousands of times in my life. And I kept telling myself, you've been here before. Why are you so scared? What are you afraid of? Right. That's an irrational fear, based on one experience, when I've had millions of, thousands of other positive experiences at these environments. So the irrational fear from the rational fears, I could really understand how that also caters and plays into guilt, right? My instance being the co-chair of the parade. Yeah, I don't have survivor's guilt. I have guilt of, man, what role did I play in this actually happening, right? The organization of the event, the structure, the people who ran to me to find their kids, right? Like the guilt that I have from that experience, not being able to solve problems and help people to the magnitude I wanted that day, as quick as they needed help. I carry a lot of guilt from that. But I also know to a degree it's irrational, because I'm only one person and I can only help so many people in one time, and I'm only capable of so much. So Todd, like, have you ever struggled with this irrational versus rational? And like, what kind of guilt have you carried? Doesn't have to be to your experience of route, because I'll tell you first off, man, like, you're a hero. Like, you shouldn't carry any guilt, and you may, and that's okay because you're human. But like, when it comes to guilt, like, where do you sit from irrational to rational? What kind of guilt do you carry, if any, and how does that impact you?
I, you know, I, your conversation on, or your statement about going into places, where you've done that 1,000 times, and now, post this event, how your mindset has changed. We brought it up a few shows back where we were talking about just that, you've got to, I think Vanetta or Dr. LaRosa had made a comment about getting into things, at snackable kind of timelines, like, don't just rush in if you're not comfortable to go into concerts again, or don't just rush into going into an environment where you're not feeling safe anymore, like, even though you went to it 1,000 times. And so I found myself practicing that a lot more, with becoming more familiar with the safety of things and putting myself in a situation. But the guilt part, we've all done like things in our life that we wish we would have done something different. Some that have maybe offset somebody else's happiness, or our own journey to success, and whatever that would be. I guess I've just personally, I've always, at least as far back as I can remember, I've always been put into situations where I've had to fight to get out, and I've had to fight through, whether it was becoming a great athlete and always fighting to like try to get to the top. I always had that mentality of just trying my best through everything. When I went through, when my playing days were over, probably that's the biggest part that I would ever come back in my life and say, did I do the right thing at that moment? Mm-hmm. Did I, I walked away from it on a high. I was doing really well. But then where I'm at sitting in my chair today, if I wouldn't have left the game, I wouldn't have met my wife. Mm-hmm. If I didn't leave the game, I wouldn't have my beautiful children, if I didn't leave the game, maybe I wouldn't have been put in that situation in Las Vegas to be able to help all those people. And so I'm very comfortable now where I'm at, being able to say there's a purpose for what I'm doing. And I firmly believe that, and I just follow that purpose. So I don't, guilt has been a hard thing for me to try to digest, and I'm hoping to learn more about this. But the depression part, I guess I'll finish on this. When I did leave and I was severely depressed, was I depressed because of the decision I made, or was I depressed because of my own inner drive of always trying to have success, and now I'm at the very bottom of everything in my life, and I don't even know what success meant at that time to me. Like, what was I had to restructure my whole definition of what success was and rebuild these goals now outside of sports in the real world. How do I achieve that same success as when you're striking a guy out in the bottom of the ninth? How do you replicate that? So that was really tough for me. That was a challenge. Is that guilt? I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's regret, right? I think it's more, personally, not medically, Dr. LaRosa, right? Like, I think, no different than you alluded to, Todd, right? We've all done bad in our lives. It's not as if we're perfect people, right? I think your faith, Todd, would tell you we're all sinners. My experiences would tell me all people are capable of bad things. The goal is just not to do them, right? And I say this at work all the time, like, and my team members at work will tell you, like, one of my most common themes is like, just be a good person, right? Like, that's the overall mantra in life. Like, just be a good person. But, I'll sit here and I'll tell you guys, I've done some bad things to some good people, and I've been wrong to a lot of people who've always been right. Right. And, we talked offline a little bit, the three of us, how we believe, and we've been had instilled upon us, like, good things happen to good people. Right. I've been told this my whole life: be a good person, good things will happen to you. And in many instances, that's held true. Right. But if that could be true, why can't the opposite, bad things happen to bad people, being true? Right. So I will tell you, like, part of my guilt from my experience is not the actions I took and not the overall experience itself, is like, man, what did I do in life to deserve this? Right. And not to say that I did deserve it. Right. But in a sense, that guilt is really, for me, the most heavy right now, is like, and it's like, why me? And it's not I'm trying to be a victim. It's not I'm trying to be whatever the word is, but it's just like, we all have these feelings like, man, what the hell was I put in that for? Now, I'll tell you, even though I know now what I was put in that situation for, it was to help others, and it was to create Walking Tall, frankly. But I still sit back and think, like, man, God, I really wish I didn't have that experience, even though good things have come from it. Right. Yeah. So, like, Dr. LaRosa, like, talk a little bit about that. Like, how do we get past that mindset of the why me and woe is me and all these things? Like, what type of, suggestions, comments can you give towards that mantra as well?
Well, first of all, I just love the fact that both of you are so transparent about your emotions and about your experiences, because
I was saying, Dr. LaRosa, you were muted. Quick, can you start your whole statement over? We didn't hear the beginning of it.
Oh, that's weird. I'm so sorry about that.
All right, we're in live. We're good. We've done this before, so.
A glitchy system today. I just started by saying that I appreciate so much and have such great respect for the fact that both of you can share your rawest emotions. You're so transparent and how you feel and what you've gone through, and how you relate those feelings to everyone that's listening is so important. So people know that they're not alone. And what you're going through and what you've experienced and what you've described from different times in your life where you had to restructure everything and where you had to go back and think, why did this happen to me? These are experiences and feelings that we all have. And, when you look at the examples that you've given, they're high level examples, and people go through these things in their lives in so many different ways, and they just question their path in life. They question years that they've spent doing something, and then it doesn't work out and they go in a different direction. And it makes people have to really just step back, reframe, reevaluate, and go forward, and this is where this concept of Walking Tall resonates with all of us. Nobody's life is going to happen on a perfect pathway of achievement without failure. I don't believe I've ever met anybody who can say that they are where they are in life without regret, without failure, without experiences that have pulled them down and dragged them down. And Todd came up with a great exercise for the three of us to participate in. And I finished mine just yesterday that I sent to Todd. And that was discussing a time in our lives where we were down and we were rock bottom and we needed others walk tall for us and pull us back up. And reliving this one particular experience that I shared with Todd, I won't spoil it now because I know he has plans for it, brought me back to a very emotional state that I didn't realize I would feel until I started to tell this 2 or 3 minute story. And it was a really rough time for me. We've all been there, so when I hear about, Todd, your experience and just how insanely talented you were as a player and where you got to and what your life, was like getting there, and then your decision at a certain time and the factors in your head at that time, as to why you stepped away from it. It's so incredible to think about how far you got, how talented you were, and for you to look back and enjoy that talent and appreciate those experiences and give yourself the credit that you absolutely deserved, and look on your family now and say, hey, these people might not be here if I didn't take a different road, a different path in my life. That's the example. That's self-actualization. Chris, when you look at everything that you went through that fateful night and all of the after effects that you were left with, and the work that you're doing each and every day to get to a healthy place after everything, that's an example. You're reframing your existence. Your existence before that day was a lot different than it is now. And you have many experiences and things in your life that you've pulled from to give you that strength to go to that therapy, to go to those support groups, and to walk tall for yourself and for others like you have been doing. And a testament to you and you're moving forward is one thing is what you're doing with Walking Tall and what you're trying to do for everybody else. So, as I said, guilt in its relationship to anxiety and depression is real. And there's research to show that increased feelings of guilt actually increase PTSD symptomology. There's research to support that an increased family history of depression is linked to higher feelings of guilt. And so these are all reminders for us to keep checking our mental health and make sure that we're able to get the help and the support that we need periodically for these things that come up. And how we deal with the subjective feelings of guilt and regret, it's a constant lifetime process. It's constant work to reframe, reevaluate, set new goals, and keep moving forward. There's a scene in one of the Rocky movies, I think it's Balboa, where he talks about, life is about how hard you can get hit and get up and keep moving forward. And, essentially, this is not very psychological or, medical in terms of my explanation at this segment of our show. It's really just more of a personal reflection. But in every person's own way, shape, and form, we have to do that. Some of us have predispositions to a greater degree for anxiety and depression and OCD and other kinds of things that will get in our way to be able to walk tall and move forward as readily as others. But we all have those roadblocks, and we all have those challenges, and have to figure out ways of being able to keep going forward. And
yeah, you said, oh, go ahead. I'm sorry. Yeah, finish. Go ahead,
No.
doctor. I'm sorry.
I'm just saying everyone's story is valid and everyone's story is different, but to different degrees.
Yeah. And you said something there too, that kind of like resonated with me, right? Like reframe my existence, right? Like Todd, I don't know how you feel about that statement, but many times to some of my friends who knew me pre-July 4th, 2022, like I keep saying to them, and it's not a healthy statement, right? Because it's impossible. It's an impossibility, frankly. Like, I just wish I was the same person I was July 3rd, right? Like I kind of liked that person. I kind of enjoyed life in a different manner. heck, I didn't even know you guys, right? And you might not have liked the Chris Maliszewski of July 3rd, right? You might have found him to be whatever. I mean, not that you even like me now, Todd, you're stuck with me, but you get the point, right? It really has changed my existence to a degree, and my focus and my energy, and my passions, and all the things that I had in me on July 3rd. They're still there, but they're reframed, and they have new intended outcomes, right? July 3rd, I was trying to like go to concerts and do this and that, and now I'm trying to just get Walking Tall to be the movement we all want it to be, right? And if not for the 4th of July, in my experience, and knowing you, Todd, and meeting you, Dr. LaRosa, these things would not have happened. And I got to tell you, I'm so happy, and I'm thankful to a degree that my existence has been reframed, because now I know I have a sense of purpose, and we have a sense of purpose as a group and a unit. And so, Todd, I got to believe you feel somewhat similar, just knowing your story and the outcomes and the aftermath of it, and the good you've been able to create because of it. Like, how are you feeling? Like, who were you on, what, September, October? So September, was there 30 days in September? So who were you September 30th, 2017, compared to who you are now due to your experience on the 1st?
I think, I've talked about this before. I'm not sure that I've talked about it on the Walking Tall forum, but man, both of you guys, like, that was really cool to listen to both of you talk about that. Number one, I think on September 30th, I was a person that was trying to continue to identify what my own version of success meant to me. And so you talk about goals, setting realistic goals to try to achieve these successes in your life. The regret I probably had almost daily. And you think about, like, from an athlete's perspective, I pitched, I gave up a base hit, I lost the ball game. Now I have to deal with that for a week. I go abuse my body. I get myself mentally prepared to go after and go stand back on that mound and go compete again. Or if I'm a position player, it's the same type of thing. Or if I don't do good on a test in school, I'm constantly, how hard I take that on myself, I'm going to constantly grind to go back. And so there's all these little life goals, and set up through failure, we learn how to deal with that adversity in our life. And for me, on September 30th, I was trying to, like, get my marriage back in place. I was trying to figure out, how the heck can I work less, because I was working a lot in an industry where I'm self-taught. I'm teaching myself over and over all these concepts to try to get to a point where I can be financially free and be a good dad and spend time and navigate and try to figure all these things out. On top of, yeah, I'm a nice guy, but I didn't really have any self-purpose in, like, really trying to go out and be proactive and helping people. And what happened to me on that night was a total reset of everything that I had ever thought was important, and it defined a true definition of what my own success is, of being able to put my head down every single night and know that I'm in a happy place, and I'm able to breathe, and I'm able to wake up. And to Dr. LaRosa's, see, it comes off sometimes, Dr.
Sometimes it's natural. The other times it's like,
yeah. But you made a comment. You made a comment about Balboa, right? And the Rocky series. I love Rocky, by the way. Plus he's from Philly, so you gotta, But the fact that we all get knocked down, everybody gets knocked down, right? We've all been hurt. We've been pushed down, whether we did it ourselves or someone else did it to us. We've been on that ground. We've been cut. We've been dirty. How do we get back up? And sometimes it's really hard to get up on your own. But all of a sudden, maybe there's that hand that is extended and it comes out of nowhere, right? And that hand lifts you up. Or you just
text
inner courage because you're so pissed off at yourself of being knocked down so many times, you've had enough. And you stand back up and you find a different path to dust yourself off and keep moving forward. And I love the inspiration. Some of those movies, come out and they really teach us, like, with hard work. You mentioned it, I think, in our first episode, Dr. LaRosa, about, you might be in a really dark place. And we learned this from talking to Ian, Chris. You might be in a super dark place right now in your life. And it sucks. But you're not alone, right? With some time, with some conversation, there's somebody out there that will help you get through the next day, the next 2 days. Look at what you just went through, Chris. You know, a rehash of an emotion that triggered, that was, you know, brought on by a external kind of experience, something that happened to you that brought on all these emotions from that horrible day. And look at where you are right now, man. Like, you're a totally different person than what you were 24 hours ago and 48 hours ago and 72 hours ago.
Mhm.
You got that Chris Maliszewski like energy back. You know, you got that smile back to you. So time does heal, I believe,
Sure.
as long as you know you have the help of someone like, you know, a Dr. LaRosa or friends, or just the hope and faith. For me, I'm very faith-based, as I've mentioned.
Yeah.
You know, that's my strength. That's what I lean on. But
Yeah.
I guess that's what it means. That's what it means.
Yeah, it's really poignant, Todd, frankly, because I think, you know, the three of us as individuals and as a unit have always intended, but even before we knew each other, frankly, to be helpers, if you will, right? We always looked for the good in people. We looked for the good in the world. We looked to promote the good in the world. Dr. LaRosa, you know, you found your niche in psychology and work in that sort. Todd and I think, whether it was baseball or technology or me in Parks and Rec, like, we're always kind of just like in flux, right? Like, we never had a guided mission, right? 10, 15 years ago, my mission was to make it to the big leagues like Todd's was. And then my mission was to be a head baseball coach at a Division I program, and all those things fell by the wayside. And let's face it, like, while they're cool and they can help some people, they can't help a lot of people. And now, due to our experiences, and I say this, with some confidence and through Walking Tall, right? Where I work, there's 35,000 people in Highland Park. And Todd, the work you do via the Scout Hub and all the help you provide young athletes to get exposure and all these things, and you help college coaches to recruit athletes in a more organized, streamlined fashion. And Dr. LaRosa, all the work you do with helping young children with developmental disabilities and things of that sort, right? We always had other passions and interests. But I think now, due to our experiences, we have like a super uber focused a mission, and that's to normalize, destigmatize the mental health conversations that we have on a weekly basis and carry this out into the world. And if not for our experiences and not for the ways of which we met each other, we would just be in flux again. And Dr. LaRosa, you'd be helping people. We wouldn't even know you existed. So while I don't carry guilt from my experience, I do carry sorrow. But in some respects, I also carry like appreciation and a little bit of gratitude that I was able to prevail my experiences on the 4th of July, and from them create something that can really make a difference. Because I don't know what difference I was really making pre-4th of July. So Todd, how about you? Like, does that resonate now that we're kind of honing in and kind of hearing where I'm sitting? Like, how does that make you feel? And what thoughts kind of are sparked because of that?
January 16th, you sent me a text asking if I'd ever felt wanted to do good with what had happened. And my reply back was yes. And
Yeah.
Since that moment, this has been defined. And I'm so happy and so proud to stand tall with both of you, along with our guests and all those that are starting to follow, and create a mission of helping others and breaking the stigma, like you mentioned, within certain categories or industries, military, lifestyle, first responders, just anybody that needs help. Parents dealing with, not dealing with, but that are working with, their children with special needs or autism. I think it's awesome. It's how you said it. It's hyper focused,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm excited. I'm hoping that people can learn from our stories. I'm an open book. I've failed a lot in my life. and so have you, and so has Dr. LaRosa. We all have these moments where we've been cut up and torn down. And so I think it's just important for all of us to be more vulnerable as a society. We don't grieving. It's okay to grieve over a loss of a loved one. Nobody should ever try to tell you it's okay, just get over it.
Yep.
You don't know what someone's going through, so always try to understand that there's always people. I don't think generally are trying to be mean to each other. We just have things going on that maybe we can't understand, we can't comprehend. We have too much anxiety in our life. Take a step back and just remember that there's a lot of people that love you, and
Yeah. And even if you feel, and I'll say this, before we wrap up today's show, even if you personally as a listener don't feel as if you have that person in your life that loves you, you don't have that resource to reach out to, we're here for you. And I want to let you know, if you're hearing us out there right now and you feel these feelings that you don't have a resource, you don't have a support group, please Google Walking Tall Movement, look up our email addresses. I think it's info at, I can't even remember what it is right now, Todd, but we're here
at walkingtallpodcast.com.
Thank you. Info at walkingtallpodcast.com. You could find our socials, Google our names. I'm just a phone call, a text away. And if it means saving somebody's life, I'll do that. So please, I want you to know, through Walking Tall, through this podcast, through the other initiatives we're going to bring to the world in due time, that's our really largest overall goal, is to just be a worldwide support group. And if you feel like you don't have that in your life, please reach out to the three of us, because we are glad to be that for you. So Dr. LaRosa, before we sign off and we start to recap this week's show and tease next, how this conversation sit with you? And is there anything you'd like to say before we say goodbye?
I think we brought it back to the basics, which is always so good. And what we talked about, what we wanted to do for people, is exactly what we shared today.
I'm gonna give you a timeout. Start over. There's a delay today. Yeah,
we have an audio difficulty.
Yeah, technical difficulties.
My mute button is not chosen, so I do not understand this. So sorry.
It's okay.
I was saying that I really like the fact that we went back to basics and we reminded everyone what this mission is all about and what we're here to try to do. And there are tons of wonderful supports out there, free supports, peer support groups in local communities that people might not know how to find access to. If they're just looking for that 1 ounce of hope, that 1 ounce of understanding, know that they have that in us. Even if they don't know us directly, we love you and we want you to heal, and we will help you heal, and we'll help you find people to heal. We'll help you create the network of angels that will get you to the next level. We want people to forgive themselves. We want people to understand their brain physiology. We want people to give themselves an okay to find the help that they need and to rely on others and know that there's a better day. So, I feel inspired to go back to that. We have had countless hours of discussion off camera on these feelings and what we hope to do for others. And I know that we're not going to stop until people listen and we're able to get people in a healthier place mentally. So.
Yeah, exactly. And I think real quick, Todd, before I turn it to you to say goodbye, I referenced quickly to the two of you earlier today, a conversation I had with a classmate that I had in elementary school and high school I hadn't talked to for 20 years. And he served in the Coast Guard. He caught wind of Walking Tall on social media, and we had about a 45-minute conversation yesterday. As you referenced, Todd, it's been a long week for me. I've had just a rough week. I haven't slept. There's been a lot of things going on where I work, where I live, etc. And through Walking Tall, he reached out to me after 22 years to say, hey, let's talk. So I had a conversation with him last night, and he said to me, hey, Chris, just so you know, I never turn my ringer off at night. And if you need to talk in the middle of the night, if you need to text me, I'm here for you. I don't want to have happen what's happened to other servicemen and women that I've known. And he mentioned to me he's known several that have committed suicide because of their PTSD, their experiences in the military. And he's a resource. So I want to let people know that while we're a resource, there are many, many others out there, like you said, Dr. LaRosa, and really all it takes is you to ask. So please advocate for yourself, walk tall for yourself, ask for help when you need it, tell your story, because that's really the only way I think we're going to tackle this mental health crisis globally. So Todd, before we sign off, I know as we were prepping this show and pre-production, you were kind of a little leery of how this was going to go and where we were leading to it, but I hope as we brought it home, you can walk away from today's show feeling pretty good about yourself, what you've done, and what we're doing for Walking Tall.
I'm so proud to be with you two, and our movement is so impactful and just filled with love. And I want to be able to say two things. One, on the walkingtallmovement.com, we have a resource page that has, tons and tons of crisis outreach, lifelines, American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. We've got tons of contacts for anybody and pretty much almost every situation you might be dealing with. So on our website, walkingtallmovement.com, the resources page, tons of free information for anyone that might be experiencing trauma or something in their life right now. Number one. Number two, this show was really, I think, a great show, and I'm again really blessed to have been a part of this. But I'd like to take maybe just 5 seconds or 10 seconds and of a silence, if we don't mind. And during this silence, I would ask you as a listener and us as the host to reflect on maybe that one moment where we help somebody in a time of need, and think about maybe that person in your life right now, maybe it's you, that needs help. Think about how you can help that person just by maybe getting in touch with them with a phone call or a text, telling them you love them. Say a prayer, whatever that is, this next 5 to 10 seconds. But I want that 5 to 10 seconds to be about walking tall, either for yourself or how you're going to walk tall for somebody else right now. So if I could, we haven't done this yet.
Let's do it. It's new segment.
But just the next 5 seconds, maybe let's think about that right now. Thank you.
Now do it.
Yeah, now do it. Now go walk tall for somebody.
Yeah.
Let's do this.
Yeah.
So I'm excited.
Yeah. And when it comes to just doing it, I hope Nike doesn't get mad at us by saying that. But
doing it. We didn't say
just doing it. Just doing it. If you're struggling out there after that 5 second delay to decide how you can help somebody or yourself for that matter, the thing I want to say is use the example of Todd. July 7th, I didn't know who he was. He reached out to me, sent a text, and now 9-10 months later, look where we are. And that's a living example of walking tall. And above all else, above all else, what I want you as a listener to know, and both you, Dr. LaRosa, and you, Todd, to know that while I certainly wish my experience on the 4th of July never occurred, I want to let you both know that had it not happened, I wouldn't have met the two of you. And to me, that's been the most impactful outcome of my experience in my event. And it'll probably be forever life-changing as we carry this mission forward. So I want to just say thank you to you both for being on my team. Thank you for continuing on this journey with me and us and everybody a part of the movement. If you're not yet in, let's go. What are you waiting for? This show has just been a lot of fun. It's really been heartfelt. It's really been impactful. I hope for you as a listener, for both you, Todd, and Dr. LaRosa, but it also has been for me. So thanks for sharing this time with me as we had this conversation. And I encourage you next week to tune in, as we're going to turn the page a little bit. We're going to flip the script. We're going to get into one of Dr. LaRosa's passions and experiences and things like that. We're going to celebrate the end of Autism Awareness Month. We're going to have a lot of really fun things to discuss, maybe a few guests here and there that want to pop in and share a story or two. So please, April is Autism Awareness Month. We're going to celebrate Dr. LaRosa and all the work she's done in her entire career. And we're going to talk a little bit about autism and how it impacts families and individuals. So please tune in next week. and have a great rest of your week, and walk tall.
Walk tall.
Walk tall, everybody.
Walk tall.
We'd like to thank our sponsor, The Balance Project. Check them out at www.thebalance-project.org. Thank you so much for being a proud supporter of the Walking Tall movement.